Yeah, there's been like two experiences that I always think back on that I think really helped me kind of get to my fastest 100 mile. And the first one was in 2015. I was in really good shape. It was one of my best training blocks. And I went after it at this race called the Desert Solstice Track Invite. And I was on world record pace for through 80 miles. I needed to average like a 7-minute mile pace for that last 20, which was actually is around 7 seconds slower um than what the world record average pace was at the time. So it was like I didn't even have to run current world record pace. I had banked enough time, and the wheels just kind of started coming off, and I just couldn't produce more than a 7.5 minute mile for those last 20. And the world record slipped by. Still broke the American record that day, but it was like I just knew in the back of my mind, I was like, I was right there. I was at the spot where you just need to be able to like dig down and get after it. Um, and I let it slip away. So I was like, well, what do I have to do to make sure that doesn't happen again or get back to that spot so I can sort of do that last 20 miles better? And that kind of caused me to kind of explore more things around proper pacing and things like that and kind of get a little more dialed in on that. So that was a real helpful one. The other one was I went to that same event a few years later, went after the world record there again and just blew up epically, dropped out at like 60 miles. Um, and I reflected back on that one. It was like I had been just sort of like singularly focusing on these really short loop, like 400-meter track, 100 miles for a while. And it was just like you sort of lose a little bit of the sharpness if you just go one to the next, one to the next, one to the next, or you make that your primary focus for too long. So I stepped away from that event and decided to train for the San Diego 100 mile, which is a mountain 100-mile race in San Diego or just outside of San Diego for the first half of that next year. And it was such a fun, different training block because I was training specifically for it out on the trails that when I finished that race, had a good outcome there. I ended up winning that one and then went back to the flats and started training for, these short, more runnable 100 miles again. I felt like I had that like real deep desire to like want to go after it and get into the, when it really came time to pay, really like put in the work and stuff like that. And I had one of my better training blocks leading into the next race, which is where I actually did run my fastest 100 miler at. So that was another one where I just recognized like you need to give yourself like breaks from the primary goal from time to time. It doesn't mean you need to like stop running or completely like quit or anything like that, but it just might mean like do something a little different, let that fatigue, that mental fatigue, or even maybe physical fatigue from running real controlled settings for long periods of time and kind of build up another strength like running uphill and things like that and give your mind a little bit of a rest from the monotony of going around loops for the whole race versus kind of going through some like scenic trails and things like that. So that was the other one that really stood out to me that kind of really helped me kind of understand like how I should probably structure training and racing over a 1 to 2 year kind of time frame.
When it comes to like you referencing kind of introducing potentially not only different scenery, but different even modalities, maybe, how much do you cross train and how does that vary, I'm sure, between if you're prepping for a race versus maybe just maintaining with something maybe a little further in the future? What does cross training look like for you? And is there any weightlifting? Is there any other aerobic exercises that you're integrating?
Yeah, strength training is a non-negotiable for me now. I've been doing that now pretty consistently for a few years where I look at that as when I was younger, it would be like I would do strength training because I do like to strength train. But if I got into like a really fun training build and it was like there'd be times where I'd be like, I'll just go for another run and skip the strength training session. Whereas now it's like if I get that desire, I ignore it. I do the strength session because I think that's what, especially when you get into these like really like monotonous, very mechanically uniform type events that I'm doing on these runnable like tracks and things like that. I think you just need to make sure you're not developing weaknesses and imbalances and things like that. And the best way to do that is to get into the gym and do strength work and make sure that that stuff is all staying up to pace. Um, the other thing I've been doing a lot more of recently, and I haven't explored this in terms of how this produces or what type of result this produces on race day, is doing more cycling and training. Because I mean, essentially, you can kind of build a stronger aerobic base because you could just do more volume on the bike, but you eliminate the impact that's required. So, I'm 39 now, so I can't get away with the same things I could when I was in my 20s. So to go out and run, an insane amount of miles or get up to 150 miles a week, that might be something I have to do less of. I might be able to still do that if I'm peaking for a race during that peaking phase, but I probably have to be a little more cautious about that. So, um, doing some more cross training on the bike and things like that, or if you get an injury or something like that, and you need to kind of lower the impact but maintain fitness, I'll use like cross training stuff like cycling and things for those times as well.
Do you follow like as far as the lifting? Is it a very specific methodology that's based or meant to kind of supplement what you do on the running side, or are those kind of treated as two different worlds as far as how the what the strength training looks like?
Yeah, it's a good question. I definitely have some movements that I work on that are specific to me that are just to kind of help keep in place some of the imbalance that are unique to me. Uh, I do focus on a fair number of single leg stuff when I can too, just because running is basically all single leg movement. You're going from one leg to the next. You're not ever really on both at the same time. But my standard kind of baseline is just trying to make sure I'm consistently getting in some of the more compound movements. So like going into the gym and like like putting some weight on like a hex bar and pulling it off the ground. That sort of thing is something I'm going to keep in there because I think those compound movements are just they're gonna hit so many of the major muscle groups all at once and sort of keep a little bit more of a semblance of balance versus me targeting like a single muscle group and then potentially creating an imbalance. There's some other ones that are a little more like maybe running specific that are helpful too. I always try to do some version of hamstring curl to help kind of keep that side of the posterior chain built up and strong. Partly because that I've historically had a little bit of a weaker posterior chain comparatively, so for me, keeping that one in there is important. Bent and straight leg weighted calf raises are also ones that I like to try to keep into the rotation quite a bit. So I sort of keep that kind of explosive pop in that lower leg in place and things like that. And then outside of the more weighted stuff, I'll do things like some more plyometrics or what like you can call like muscular endurance type sessions that I might do those maybe a little closer to the race versus the more heavier weight stuff that I'd be doing, during kind of the off season or the early stages of training.